Okay, there we are. Hello and welcome everyone to tonight's reading. I am Amanda Cherry, she, her. I am an author of contemporary and historical urban fantasy, space opera, the occasional role play game. I am so thrilled to be back here at QuaranCon. These folks were awesome and helped me launch the Dragonstone Conspiracy earlier this year. Let me tell you that launching a book in a pandemic is not the easiest thing, and I really have felt wonderfully supported by these folks. So I would like to encourage you all to turn around and support them in return. Make sure you visit QuaranCon2020.com. Explore that top banner there, look at who the panelists are, go find them, go find their books and merchandise and art, peruse the artist alley, and try to have the most complete convention experience that you're able to while we are all stuck at home some more. As I mentioned, QuaranCon helped me launch the Dragonstone Conspiracy earlier this year, which has been a wild and amazing ride. So many of you were with me for that book launch and have subsequently watched the video, and even more have headed over to the Fantasy Network or to Amazon Prime Video on demand and watched the Strowlers Ireland episode. So I feel like many of you in the audience have started to get to know Pepper, my protagonist. And so tonight I wanted to introduce you instead to the book's antagonists. The Dragonstone Conspiracy has a neat twist to it in that the antagonists are not the bad guys. The bad guys are operating independently of the rest of the story for most of the story. But Pepper is being pursued. She is being antagonized by some folks she doesn't understand who they are or what their motivations are. If you are a fan of the Strowlers franchise, look forward to seeing these fellows in some upcoming film and television projects. But for now, I am going to introduce you to the book's two adorable antagonists. Horton McDavish's desk had never been clean. From the day he'd been given this office, this cavernous chamber in the attic of Bletchley Park Manor, every available surface had been occupied with some pile of paperwork or another. It confounded him sometimes how chaos always seemed to reign on the top of his desk, when in all other ways he thought himself such an orderly fellow. Stout and stocky, with ginger hair and a handlebar mustache, he was normally so tidy as to be a proper caricature of a British government man. He figured magic to be at the root of the mayhem. Magic, as far as he could tell, was the opposite of order. And since the start of the war, the Arcane Intelligence Division had been at its most tumultuous. Just this week, the Kiwis had sent a poorly coded telegram regarding the possible use of a powerful magical item within their borders. The very thought of being asked to investigate further turned Horton's stomach a little. The number of miles to be traveled over land, air, and sea. Sea would be daunting even in peacetime, but having to traverse multiple theaters of combat made it unappealing to the extreme. And it wasn't as though this revelation was entirely new to him. The British had word of this item's discovery as early as 1928, possibly going back to 27. But the Baldwin government just hadn't cared much about magic. McDavish had been instructed to keep an eye on this situation, whatever that meant. It was under Chamberlain that Britain had really begun to investigate magic as a tool that could be used in furtherance of the British Empire. But it wasn't until Churchill had taken office that the Arcane Intelligence Department had evolved into its current state. Using magic in the service of the British war effort had been a key plank in the Prime Minister's platform from the beginning. It was an idea he borrowed from the Americans, and the reason Horton McDavish had been elevated from his position as a one-man department relegated to an unassuming desk in London to this well-supplied office in the heart of the British intelligence apparatus. Since then, he'd had much more pressing and much more local issues to deal with and goings-on in New Zealand. "Horton!" his partner called to him, pushing open his office door without bothering to knock. "A call's just come in. It's being decoded now. I think this could be it." McDavish looked up at the intruder and gave a nod. If magic was the opposite of order, Cavil Weathersby was the opposite of Horton McDavish. Tall and lanky, clean-shaven, with unruly black hair and his suit always in need of a proper pressing, Cav was as American as Horton could imagine a person being. He'd been sent to Bletchley from Washington, D.C. on the trail of an item not unlike the one known to be in New Zealand. The item had crossed borders and changed hands wildly and in rapid succession not long after the attack on Pearl Harbor had brought America's support of the British war effort out of hiding. And America was paying close enough attention to know about it while it was happening. They'd managed to ascertain the item had come into the possession of a young woman, and they had a pretty accurate description of her at that. But what they hadn't been able to do was tail her effectively. The FBI had lost her trail pretty soon after they'd picked it up, and it had been Cavil Weathersby and his colleagues in the OSS Arcane Division who had been tasked with finding it again. Several of the men on the arcane desk in Washington were still quite occupied with searching for the item and its custodian within the United States. But Cav, possibly through some magic talents of his own, Horton was far too polite to ask, had determined the woman and her totem had crossed the proverbial pond, and he had been subsequently assigned to McDavish's division at Bletchley Park to continue the search. That talisman could be of vital service to the Allied war effort. Having determined, thanks to the ongoing and assiduous British intelligence gathering apparatus, that the item was absolutely not on the island of Great Britain, Weathersby had turned his attention across the Channel to Ireland. A neutral country with no obligation to cooperate with either American or British authorities, and a place where magic was known to be free and unregulated, the Emerald Isle seemed a logical place for a person who wished to lay low. "You think, really?" Horton asked, standing from his desk. Whether or not they were making progress on their American quarry, anything to take his mind off New Zealand was welcome. "I think really, yeah," Cav replied. "All I know is I got there something about flowers." Horton sounded, crossing his arms over his chest as he followed Cav out the door and into the narrow staircase. Maybe. Flower was the code name of the fellow American the OSS had sent to Ireland. He was Irish by lineage, American by birth, and a magic user of some variety. That was all Horton McDavish knew of the man. Rather, that and the fact they'd not heard a word from him in the months since his deployment. Horton presumed Cav must know more than he did. He'd spent enough time in the intelligence service to know better than to ask questions. Things in this office were need to know, and Horton presumed he just didn't need to know yet. He followed his partner through the main floor hallway and into an operations room, past one of the ubiquitous blue "Do Not Help the Enemy" signs. "Is it here yet?" Cav called out to no one in particular. "They're just running it over from the cipher office now," a dark-haired woman answered, hanging up a telephone and turning her attention back to her typewriter. The nameplate on her desk identified her as Beatrice Camberwinkle, lead clerk. "It's coming from the cipher office," Cav said, turning to Horton and waggling his eyebrows. This was Cavil Weathersby's first message traffic through the cipher office, and he was far too American to hide his enthusiasm for it. He had tailed this dame and the trinket she carried across a continent and then across an ocean, and he had a very strong feeling he was about to know for sure where she'd been hiding since he lost her scent several months ago. He fidgeted in spite of himself as he turned his attention toward the doorway. "Keep hold of yourself, lad," Horton admonished him quietly. "We're all professionals here." Cav frowned at his partner and continued to fidget. He danced beneath himself, shoving his hands in and out of his pockets, until a young woman carrying a manila envelope came through the door. He reached out to take the envelope, but the girl brushed by as though she hadn't so much as seen him there. She approached the desk by the window and handed her parcel over to the office's lead clerk. "Thank you, Louise," she said. "You're welcome," Louise answered, smiling at the other woman before turning to leave. Cav wrung his hands at his waist and looked expectantly at the envelope. Beatrice paid him no mind. She pulled a ledger from out of her desk drawer, opened the envelope, and recorded the delivery. "Here you are, Mr. Weathersby," she said, slipping the page back into the envelope and holding it out across her desk. Cav was there in 2 strides. He snatched the envelope and yanked the page out from inside. "Thank you, Beatrice," Horton said, frowning in the direction of his impolite partner. But Cav didn't hear him. "Ardara!" Cav yelled. He flipped the page around so Horton could see, but his hand was shaking so intensely the typed words were completely illegible. Our girl is in Ardara, he shouted, louder this time. Horton grabbed Cavil by his arm and spun him around, pointing at the bright blue sign on the wall. Don't help the enemy. Careless talk may give away vital secrets. Keep it down, man, McDavish insisted. She's in Ardara, Cav said back quietly. County Donegal, in Ireland. Horton's hand still on his arm, Cav led them out of the bustling operations room and into an empty hallway. We know where she is, he said, shoving the page toward his partner. Horton took hold of the paper to read it for himself. It was blank. What the hell are you on about? Horton asked, turning the page around. Cav shook his head. He took the page and shoved it back in the envelope. She's in Ardara. It says so, right there. It said nothing of the sort, Horton argued. In fact, it said nothing at all. I have no idea what it is you're referring to. Never mind that, Cav insisted. He reached into the pocket of his rumpled corduroy blazer and brought out a hinged metal box. It reminded Horton very much of a folded daguerreotype his mother had kept of her grandparents. Cav opened the hinge slowly, revealing a green velvet lining on one side and a glass-covered compartment on the other. Beneath the glass, there were scattered pieces of what looked like dried flowers, a jumble of leaves and petals with no sort of order or reason to how they were arranged. What's that? Horton asked, bending his head to get a better look at the thing. He still had no idea what it was. It's a compass rose, Cav answered, his eyes fixed on the dried plants beneath the glass. Of course, Horton grumbled. It's a compass rose. He shook his head and frowned at Cavil. What the hell is a compass rose? Just watch, Cav said, his voice almost a whisper as he balanced the strange item on his palm. Horton blew out his cheeks with a huff. What exactly was he supposed to be watching? This bunch of dead flowers inside a picture frame held his interest not at all. He was convinced it was going to be another case of Cav seeing a message on a blank sheet of typing paper. But then he saw it. One pink petal at first, and then the next, and then the next. The little tea rose seemed to be coming back to life. The petals brightened and they plumped. They curled and ruffled at the edges. Then they began to coalesce into their proper shape. The leaves followed, growing thicker and greener, even their veins pullulating with chlorophyll. Horton McDavish was mesmerized. And he was also terrified. In his job in the Arcane Intelligence Service, Horton had seen pages and pages of reports on magic, on its uses and users, on its possibilities and its limitations. He'd read countless accounts of magical people, places, things, and occurrences. But he'd never actually seen magic with his own two eyes. He figured it must be much the same as a man having read extensively on the sea, finally seeing the shore for himself. Good God, he said. Uh-huh, Cavil affirmed, nodding his head as he began to smile. This is a compass rose, he repeated himself. Flowers got our girl pinned in Ardara, and we are going to get her. Again, to find out more about Horton and Cav, as well as to meet and experience more of our friend Pepper Jones, the cover of this book I cannot show you because this is an ARC and the cover is wrong. But this is what the back looks like. It is called The Dragonstone Conspiracy. You can find it wherever books are sold. And I especially love bookshop.org because it allows you to support your local bookseller while also supporting authors at all levels of the profession, from our wonderful indie self-published friends all the way up to my besties who are bestsellers and Hugo nominees and Bookshop.org is my favorite place to find books. But if you are an Amazon person, also available on Kindle and other ebook formats. All right. Oh, how cute. Hit that thumbs up button. That's precious. The next thing I want to do for you, because we still have some time, is I have been working on, where are you? A wonderful story with a co-author. Let's take this off here. And completely changing gears. I want you all to see what Ruby Killingsworth, the star of my debut, Rights and Desires, see what she has been up to in the time since we last checked in with her. And I would like to introduce you to Vivian Kane, who is about to give her a very difficult time. All you need to know going into this is that Vivian went to visit Ruby in her office because they have an ex in common and discovered there was a demon lurking. And so that's causing problems for everyone involved. Vivian groans at the sound of the knock at the door. She hadn't taken this for the sort of hotel where the staff would harass her over not wanting fresh towels. The sign says, "Do not disturb," she shouts, and immediately regrets that decision. She'd wanted all her wits about her and every bit of her power available when she'd gone to meet Jacob's ex in her office, and so had gone in with nary a drop of liquor in her system. But that level of sobriety had never suited Vivian well, and the unpleasant side effects of such, along with the memory of some ill-advised kissing in the elevator, had sent her careening from the Ruby Tower and into a corner seat at the nearest bar. She'd stayed there until a kindly barback had poured her into a cab back to her hotel. She has no idea what time it is, nor how long she's been passed out. She also has no idea what became of most of her clothes. But what she does know is that she has a splitting headache and no desire for company. The knock sounds again. "Go away," Vivian calls back. "Let me in, Vengeance." Fuck. Before yesterday, Vivian had never heard that voice, but she would have known it anywhere. She rolls out of bed, stumbles to the door, grabbing a black t-shirt she spots on top of the dresser as she goes. She tosses aside the swing bar and turns the handle just enough to release the bolt. She's barely able to clear the hallway as the door swings fully open to allow Ruby Killingsworth to step inside. She looks good, too. She's wearing a white tailored pantsuit with a magenta blouse that shouldn't have worked with her hair color and yet somehow does. Her hair is down, loose and shiny, and whatever perfume she has on smells so good it ought to be illegal. The damn woman is every bit the image of polish and perfection, from the top of her head to the tips of her obscenely expensive shoes. No one should be able to look so damned flawless, especially at whatever time of the morning this is. Vivian lets out a grumble as she flops down to sit on the rumpled covers at the foot of the bed. "How the," she begins, but the words come out a mumble. She shakes her head and tries again. "Never mind. Of course you knew where I was staying. What was I thinking? So how about we start with what the hell you're doing here?" "I need you," Ruby replies flatly. "Wow." Vivian sits up a little straighter. She likes the sound of that, but it can't be all that's happening. She plays along. "That's a little forward even for me, but you did look mighty hot in that little green number yesterday." Vivian runs her hands through her still sleep tousled hair, hoping it makes her look disheveled and fetching instead of unkempt and slovenly. She grins impishly in spite of her headache. "I can't say I'm against the idea." "Well, that's not at all what I meant when I said that." Ruby tilts her head as she smiles back. "I'm absolutely game if you are. That is, after I have your help with my current situation." "Current situation?" Vivian can't help but sigh. From what Jacob had been able to share, Ruby Killingsworth has a lot of situations, some of which Vivian would just as soon have nothing to do with. "You remember that demon in my office?" "Sounds familiar," Vivian said back. "Might have heard of it." "You're cute." "So I've been told. But I digress. There's a demon in my building, and I'm going to need your help to get rid of it." "You want me to help you with a demon?" I told you I wasn't an exorcist." "I don't need an exorcist, but I do need help. Ruby replies. Her tone is hard, annoyed, and impatient. I know where it came from, I know how it got here, and I know how to send it back. But I can't do it on my own, and the son of a bitch it followed through the coil to our dimension refuses to help. You mean Loki? Ruby's mouth falls open. Then she purses her lips closed. It's more of a tell than Vivian expected of her, and it's more than enough to confirm her suspicion. As I said, he refuses to help, says it's not his problem. I'm not so experienced with Loki myself, but that does sound about his speed. Oh, it's entirely on brand. Ruby is frowning. Vivian takes note. She's beginning to suspect Ruby's acquaintance with the trickster god is more than a passing one. She wonders if this might prove useful. He says I can deal with it myself. And maybe I can, but demons aren't in my wheelhouse, and since you seem to know a thing or three, I figure you're my best first choice. I'm not saying I'll help you, Vivian replies, still taking stock of what Ruby has just revealed about her relationship with Loki. But what do you have in mind, exactly? We lure it down to retail, Ruby answers, every vestige of upset suddenly absent from her tone. She's all business now, matter of fact. At the same time, she crosses her arms over her chest and leans back against the dresser, body language that says she's at ease in the moment, confident in what she's about to say. The woman is a walking contradiction, and Vivian is intrigued. I'll make sure it's nice and crowded. Then you make it visible, the demon. Presto, all-you-can-eat terror buffet. You use their fear to give you the power you need to go up against it. You'll get it distracted while I open a portal through the coil to someplace better suited for a slithering cock monster. You chase it through, I close the portal, then you and I are in the penthouse sipping cocktails before the insurance adjuster arrives to assess the damage. I thought you said you'd sent everyone home, Vivian says. I did, Ruby answers. I got us to make up some bogus story about the wiring. Bonus points that it puts the job Starcom did on my installs in question. And anyway, I didn't necessarily mean my retail store. I was thinking more, we lure it to Starcom Tower. That way, whatever the fallout, it's Jacob's problem. As hilarious as that would be, Vivian says, there's no guarantee Remisiel will leave your office, much less the whole tower, no matter how nicely you ask. Unless, no. She dismisses that next plan entirely. Drat, Ruby says. Well, that is why we have insurance, isn't it? Ruthless, but maybe it would work. Vivian takes in a deep but shaky breath. It's an awfully specific plan, but it has merit. No wonder Ruby seems so confident about it. Vivian doesn't bother to wonder how Ruby knew about her ability to process the fear around her into usable power. But she does wonder something. You don't want to kill it? She asks, pointing out what she thought was a more obvious method of disposal. Ruby frowns. I'm not sure I'd know how to kill it, she says bluntly. And even if I did, I wouldn't have the first idea what to do about a demon corpse cluttering my lobby. But you're sure you can open a portal through the coil? Yes. How sure? Certain. Ruby stands up straight again and steeples her fingers at her waist. I'm sure Jacob has already told you this, so it's not like I'm sharing any personal information here. But I went through a bit of an ordeal last year. It was like I didn't have any powers at all. And even then, I could open a portal through the coil. Really? Know-how trumps talent every day of the week, Ruby says. That's why I came to you for help. Maybe I have the power to dispatch this thing by myself, but I don't know how. And this isn't the kind of thing I care to learn through trial and error. You were able to see the demon. You were able to recognize it, knew its name even. You were sharing with me some disturbing salient details. I think you're just the person to help me get rid of it. Don't take this the wrong way, Vivian says, shifting in her seat and trying not to get distracted by the glint of Ruby's lip gloss. But why should I help you? And don't say it's because we kissed, because I've kissed a lot of people and I've never owed them a damn thing, much less a demon hunt. That's a fair question, Ruby allows. She's smiling with her eyes, but not her mouth. Vivian wonders what she's up to. So I'll ask one in reply. What will it take to convince you? Name your price. Seriously? Vivian's mouth is dry. She tries not to fidget. She can't decide whether or not this is a trap. Seriously, anything you want. Ruby says blithely, within reason. Right, Vivian says. Sure, now it must be a trap, but somehow still intrigued. And what is the going rate for reason in billionaire circles these days? Ruby rolls her eyes and chuckles. She's shaking her head as she walks to the chair by the hotel window and lowers herself imperiously into it. She reclines just enough to easily prop her feet up on the corner of the bed. Vivian starts to grouse about shoes on the bed, but upon inspection of the pristine red soles, she pauses. Vivian is at once annoyed and mesmerized, and she keeps mum. You can't have my business, Ruby says, or my building, and nothing of sentimental value is on the table. You mean magical items? Mostly. No surprises there. That's okay. In her experience, magic items are often more trouble than they're worth. She wonders if she should have put her claw on before answering the door. How about cash? Vivian asks then. She isn't sure how she feels about charging a fee for helping with the demon removal, but Miss Killingsworth's answer will be a pretty good indicator of just how badly she wants this help. Vivian wants that data point. Oh, that you can have, Ruby answers flippantly. How much are we talking about? Vivian frowns as she considers the offer. An infusion of capital would surely do her some good at the moment, and she has no reason at all not to take this insanely wealthy, unnaturally well-coiffed woman for a few dollars. What the hell? And I am being told that we are running out of time, and so I am going to wrap it up there. Look for that story, Femmes Fatale. We're thinking 2022, but there's still a little bit of editing work to do before we can have a release date for that. I am so thrilled that you all joined me tonight. Thank you so much to this lovely audience. Thank you so much to the folks over at QuaranCon. Once again, please go check out the Artist Alley. Go check out the panelist profiles. Those of you in the audience who are authors and are looking to get your work in front of agents and editors as the world starts to open up again, I will be teaching a workshop on pitching your work. That would be Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, 5 p.m. Pacific. So that's 8 o'clock on the East Coast. And I am really, really bad at time zones. But if you check it out on the QuaranCon schedule page, your website will display the time of the workshop in local time, which is my favorite thing about the QuaranCon website, other than all of the cool stuff I've been able to find in the Artist Alley. Several of my author colleagues also have books available for only 99 cents a pop through the QuaranCon book promotion. So if you're looking for some cool reading material, I would suggest you also check that out. Once again, thank you for joining me. I am Amanda Cherry, she, her. I am locatable online at thegingervillain.com, on Twitter at Manda the Ginger, Facebook.com/thegingervillain. Thank you so much and good night.